Is driving a classic pickup truck a practical thing to do every single day? Well, stay tuned for this episode of Dentside Depot as we go over the top 10 reasons why it is or isn't practical to drive on a daily basis. Now, first of all, when I say a classic pickup truck, I am really talking about something pre-1980. So for us Ford guys, that would be a Dentside or a bump side or something along those lines. For you Chevy guys, that's your square bodies, and Dodge as well. Who really cares about a Dodge, let's be honest. But let's start with the most important thing with the pickup truck, and that is the practicality of its ability to haul things around. Now, for your common everyday person, you're going to be going to Home Depot, you're going to be moving furniture, picking up sheetrock, plywood, moving things, whatever it may be, and a classic pickup truck with an 8-foot bed is definitely very practical. And I can tell you that with these old Ford trucks, I have hauled thousands of pounds around and had zero issue with doing so. In fact, my property used to have about 30 pine trees in the back, and you can see right here I'm still not able to grow grass, and I dropped all those trees and hauled them all out with one of these old Fords. I did hundreds of loads with that truck, way overloaded, and it had absolutely no issue taking it. Let's take a look at what a modern day truck bed would look like. All right, you can see here we have a modern day truck in a crew cab configuration, which is the most common configuration. What do we have? We have a 6-foot bed, and that is going to be the norm with modern day trucks. You're not even going to get an 8-foot bed in most instances. So really, a classic truck is definitely going to get the win with cargo capacity in the back of a bed. Next up on our list today, we have towing capability. Now, there are some issues with the older trucks when you talk about towing. First of all, they're not really rated to tow as much as a modern day truck. So I'm not even going to pretend that an old Dentside Ford truck is capable of towing what, say, a brand new F450 is capable of. Now, here's some other issues. When you talk about old trucks, the wiring harnesses aren't necessarily the best for hooking up trailers. In addition, you're probably not going to have as strong of a rear axle as you would in a modern day truck. These trucks had Dana 60s or whatever they may have had. Still pretty strong, but definitely not as strong as a modern day rear axle. And also add in the fact that the rear axles are not as wide as modern day trucks, so your track stance isn't as big and your stability overall might be a little bit less. But there is something you can do to fix that. You can easily swap in something like a Sterling 1025 or a Dodge Dana 70, or you could even go with a Dodge Dana 80 and upgrade with factory disc brakes. Go with a brand new 11.5 AAM rear, which definitely would be the heaviest duty. Regardless, they all have a standard bolt pattern, so your factory wheels would still fit with different back spacing. Next, let's talk about maintenance and reliability when it comes to classic trucks. I'll be honest, I think maintenance with a classic truck is way easier than maintenance with a new truck. With many new trucks, you have to have special scan tools. Things are more advanced than they were back then, and really there's no excuse today to not be able to work on a classic truck yourself. There's tons of videos on YouTube that show you how to do it, and everything was simple. With these old trucks, if you have a basic set of wrenches, hand tools, and everything else, you're pretty much going to be able to service it completely on your own. Everything was very basic and very simple. From a reliability standpoint, yep, these engines were pretty reliable overall. The entire Ford lineup really had reliable engines. This particular one suffered from timing chain issues and also had a lack of power, but you can easily fix that for really not that much money. And then last, are parts readily available for these trucks? And I would say definitely yes. I mean, you can pretty much go to AutoZone and get anything that you want. Worst case scenario, you're ordering off the internet and you're getting it within 2 days. We really live in a golden era now with these classic trucks that almost everything is remanufactured, and you can easily get parts just like you would for a modern day vehicle. Now let's talk about interiors and whether or not they are comfortable and have features of a modern truck. Well, this is a low option truck that I'm in, or pretty much a standard option truck that I'm in. It does not have air conditioning, but besides that, it has most of the basic bones that you would have in a modern day truck. We have an AM FM stereo radio. I've upgraded the radio so I can use a plug-in player of any kind, phone, whatever you got. Yes, I don't have air conditioning in this particular truck, but you could definitely get it for sure. I have a basic gauge readout with everything that you need, and really just missing a tack. Basic shifter, basic knobs for turning the lights on, the wipers, the washers, a hood release, an e-brake, a manual shifter for the transfer case. Now, I'm not going to pretend that a brand new F450 Platinum doesn't have more features, heated seats and everything else, but when you're talking about practicality, heated seats and heated steering wheel and all that other stuff has nothing to do with practical. It's just extra options. So really, classic trucks are practical when you talk about interior features and comfort. Now let's talk about engine efficiency and fuel mileage. It's no secret that classic trucks get really bad fuel mileage. Even right here, we have a straight 6300, which in factory form actually did get pretty decent mileage, but it suffered a little bit from power. You add some performance parts to it, the fuel mileage goes down pretty quick and they're still not that efficient overall. When you compare it to a modern day truck, a lot of trucks still only get like 11 to 14 miles per gallon. So even though the fuel mileage isn't the best, it really isn't that far off from a modern day truck, depending on what you have. What about the cost of insurance on a classic truck? Well, if you're only going to be driving the truck on a non-regular basis, you can get classic car insurance for it for very cheap. If you're going to drive it every day and you don't qualify for classic truck insurance, still really not that expensive. I pay about $30 a month to insure this truck right here. So it really isn't that expensive. I would say insurance is probably cheaper than a brand new Super Duty for sure. What about the drive and the comfort of the ride in a classic truck? Well, it really depends on what you have, but right here we have a two-wheel drive 79 Ford truck with a twin I-beam front suspension, and I can tell you, this is the Cadillac of truck suspensions. A little bit of a pain to work on, but driving down the road, these suspensions are extremely comfortable. The braking system on them is also not bad. With these trucks, you would get a factory disc front and a drum rear, and it was more than sufficient to stop the weight of these trucks. So I would say handling and braking was definitely very good. But there was one drawback, and that was the power steering boxes. The power steering boxes definitely had slop on them, and when you add something like a rag joint, it would get a little bit worse. Now you can upgrade the steering box to something new with better bearings in it, but overall in factory form, you had to move the wheel back and forth a little bit. But regardless, I would say the comfort of driving these trucks was actually pretty darn good, and I have no problem daily in one every single day. Next up, we need to talk about one that you're not going to like the results of if you're a classic truck fan, and that is going to be transmissions in a classic truck. One of the biggest drawbacks to a transmission in a classic truck is that you are definitely not going to have an overdrive. In this case, we have the C6 transmission, which is by far one of the strongest and best classic truck transmissions out there. In fact, this one sat in a junkyard for 5 years before I put it in this truck, and it still shifts perfectly great. It also does a great job watering my driveway and keeping it lubricated on a daily basis, so I appreciate that as well. But I can tell you, not having an overdrive makes these very difficult to drive on the highway, as your RPMs get very high and your fuel mileage gets even worse. But with that being said, there's no one that's telling you that you can't put a modern day transmission in your truck. Whether it's a 6-speed manual like this NV5600, or maybe you put a 4 AOD in your truck with overdrive, whatever it may be, you can certainly upgrade that aspect of a classic truck and bring it up to standards of a modern day truck. Here's one of the big ones that definitely concerns a lot of people when it comes to older vehicles, especially classic trucks, and that is rust. And there's no way around it. Old vehicles rust unless they are in a dry climate. So up here in the Northeast, you are going to get rust on vehicles. It is very rare to find a classic truck that doesn't have rust on it. So for that reason, it may behoove you to drive a modern day truck every single day rather than a classic, because the rust can kill these trucks very quickly. But with that being said, modern day trucks are going to rust as well. I have seen plenty of brand new trucks, only a few years old, that also have significant rust around the wheel wells and whatever else. So it's going to happen. It's just a matter of time. You just got to find a classic truck that doesn't have too much rust on it. And our last thing we're going to talk about today is passenger space. Now, in modern days, most trucks are going to be the crew cab configuration. In old days, most trucks were the regular cab configuration that you see here. So 3 people, most likely at the most. But Ford offered options with this. You could get a super cab truck and easily fit 5 or even 6 people in the back of a truck, or in the truck in total. Or you could even opt for a crew cab and fit even more. I was certainly thinking throughout the 1970s that, hey, we're going to have companies and places that are going to want to fit in 6 guys comfortably in a truck, and they built the crew cabs throughout the 60s and the 70s to accommodate that need. So really, you can see in here, there's plenty of room for a modern work crew to fit in, and if you have one and you're willing to work, well, it could definitely work for you and definitely be practical. With all that being said, it's really up to you if you think driving a classic truck is practical. I would argue that the cost of classic truck ownership is less than a brand new one. A brand new truck is going to have to be financed at a very high loan rate, and maintenance is probably going to be more expensive than a classic truck, and you might not be able to do it yourself. We're also forgetting one of the most important things. A classic truck looks way better than a modern day truck. I don't care what you say, that is definitely the case. In addition, many people these days are upgrading these classic trucks with more modern drivetrains that are making them more reasonable to use on an everyday basis. I am certainly among those people. So for all these reasons, I would say that a classic truck is definitely practical, especially when you add some modern touches to fix the things that weren't the best throughout the 1970s. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Dentside Depot. Remember to like and subscribe and keep restoring those classic trucks.